Welcome to Network Capital, Mukesh. For anyone familiar with entrepreneurship, India, and fitness, I don't think you need an introduction. Since we're a platform focused on mentorship and careers, I'd love to start with your early life. What was your early career like when you were at IIT Kanpur? Did you know that you will end up becoming an entrepreneur and solving in the fitness space?
No, I absolutely did not have, a lot of clarity, Utkarsh, but I got some glimpse into, what my career could be. And it so happened I think after second year in college, I was a little bit disillusioned with the, academic, ladder, how it was set up, supposed to get high grades, go to US for master and so on. I was not sure. I thought I was just following, other people's journey. So I started introspecting, reflecting, reading a lot of books, etc., and came across some amazing books on entrepreneurship back then. So Akio Morita's book about Sony and Sam Walton's book, Made in America about Walmart journey and so on. And I think initial seed of a potential career in entrepreneurship was born there. And I
Mhm.
also fortunately or unfortunately did not do very well academically last 2 years. So masters was ruled out but I ended up getting job in late 90s in a US firm, and that's around the time that dot-com wars are happening. So again, I could feel a lot of pull and attraction of trying to start something, and I ended up actually quitting my job first just 18 months into it, and I did move to Silicon Valley and try to start a company, which obviously did not work out because I really had no clue. But yeah, I think so there were a lot of early signs of immense
Hmm.
interest and even some experimentation.
Right. And at that time, was fitness a part of your life?
So I was not aware that fitness was part of my life, but I have always been very active, and I grew up playing a lot of sports. I think
Hmm.
playing outdoors is what I did, growing up, all the way into going to college, where it slowed down a bit. So I was always physically active, and then but I was not into formal fitness, etc. But in my 20s, I started going to gym. That was spurred by my roommate who got into gyms and bodybuilding before me, and as he
Hmm.
started to get become very well defined, and I would feel being left out, so I started following him to the gym, and that's where I think my formal engagement with the fitness industry started. Since then I've gone through all kind of fitness regimens and experiments and so on, but yeah, around 24, at the age of 24 is when I started going to gym.
At the age of 24. So you call yourself a guinea pig of sorts when it comes to experimenting with your lifestyle and fitness and so forth. We will come to that. I want to talk about your book and your fitness largely in this discussion. But I do want to get a glimpse of, being slightly confused about your career, going to the valley, starting a company, not doing so well, and then slowly experimenting your way to success, Myntra, Flipkart, and others. Do you want to give us a flavor of what that journey has been like, so that when young professionals listen
Sure.
to it, they can
Yeah.
take away key
Yeah.
frameworks and mental models?
I think a lot of this journey has been about learning from failures and also at some point developing clarity. So for me, I think when I first moved to Silicon Valley to start a company, it was more of a romantic idea of wanting to be an entrepreneur without really understanding what does it entail. And then so I tried to start something. It failed in about 6 months or so. I was also out of money by the time, but I then made an important decision that I was clear by the time I really do want to be an entrepreneur, and I decided I'll only work for very early stage companies, and that's probably
Hmm.
the best way I can learn about being an entrepreneur. So from 1999 till 2007, I worked for four different startups, all very early stage, and I learned a tons from that. And there are challenges of working in early stage company because things don't go well. They, more often than not, there are always funding issues. Startups, shut down. Some of the four companies I worked for, one was moderately successful, and three basically, failed or shut down. But but I stayed with it. For 8 years,
Hmm.
I continued to observe, learn, experiment, develop as a professional. So by the time I started second time around in 2007, I was fully prepared. In some ways, I had done this my long-term 8-year MBA in entrepreneurship,
Hmm.
and I was able to take away a lot of those learnings, mindset, familiarity with various situations that arise in the entrepreneurial journey, which was very informative in my entrepreneurial journey later.
Was your family supportive? Because you were, I would say, quite successful early on, at least academically. You went to a great engineering college. When they see you not taking the conventional multinational route, were they excited by it?
I think in my case was a bit of an exception in the sense that, my parents, I come from a very small town in Haridwar. And after, I went to US, I think my parents kind of lost track of my career and what I was doing. And they had a, very little say, I don't know as a good thing or bad thing, but I was basically making my own decisions, etc. So fortunately, I didn't have to think a lot about that. But I had a, kind of small family of my own. And one consideration for me was to have enough of a financial cushion. So having worked in the, my daughter was just 2 year old when I started Myntra. So I ensured that, by the time I had, some, able to survive on my own for 3, 4 years. So that helped. And that's also one key input, when people jump into entrepreneurship and not thinking through about a runway, that's a big problem because you don't know, you may or
Hmm.
may not get funding in 1 year, but nothing really happens in 1 year. So creating,
Yeah.
that runway for you, it's one very important consideration that I highly recommend. So that was helpful. But yeah, to directly answer your question, I think there was very little input. I think my parents were, if anything, they were pleasantly surprised that I was moving back to India to do something.
Yeah. So Myntra, how and why?
Right. So I think my primary vector in those days was I really, really just wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was looking to start, and I've been, kind of entrepreneur in waiting for 8 years prior, right? So I was
Hmm.
really itching to go. My last two startups in US both had development centers in Bangalore. So I used to
Mhm.
come very often to interact with the teams. And in those years, 2005, 6, 7, I could feel a lot of excitement in the air. And I could feel that, whole digital economy is just on the cusp of taking off. And I had seen all that play out in US in the prior 1 decade. So I got excited about wanting to be in on a day one, get involved on the ground floor. Second thing, in the companies I've generally worked for were in the consumer intent space. So I wanted to do in the consumer intent space. I was not aware of things like TAM, etc. in those days. So in the end, I ended up picking a very boutique use case of selling personalized products online. There's one company, Cafe Press, which was doing quite well in US at the time. So I thought it was
Mhm.
a new thing, I can try that in India. But I think primary bet was on India and consumer internet and some use case to start, which again didn't work out. We ended up pivoting multiple times during first 4 years of Myntra until we
Mm.
finally arrived at online fashion retailing, which worked out.
Yeah. And these pivots, every time you had to pivot, what prompted it? What were some of the lessons from the pivots at Myntra?
Yeah, I think partly, journey of being an entrepreneur and what I also learned in my Silicon Valley days is, what people call it, confronting the brutal facts. So you may have a vision, you may have a deep conviction, something, you may build the best possible products you think you can win, but then you have to pay a lot of attention to both data at what consumers are telling you, right? And I think in the first our B2C avatar, selling personalized product online, this market was very small. We plateaued at a very, very tiny scale. When we tried to B2B, we figured out the industry was not very clean, the way corporate gifting industry was set up in India, right? We tried even experiment with the offline retailing, but the unit economics, the rents in the mall, etc., and the throughput, is not adding up. So there's always some, initially you're starting with some thesis and build it out, but then when you look at an introspect, and then at some point data adds up, you can give it a finite runway, but then you have to confront the brutal facts, so which is what would lead to every pivot every I would say 12 to 18 months in first 4 years.
Yeah. And ultimately, you did make it succeed, even though, in your words, the TAM didn't seem very high at the time. But did you, when you had the first brush with success, did you finally feel that I've arrived now, or by that time was your body slightly waning and you were realizing that you'd be getting pulled in all sorts
I
of
think the
directions?
interesting part of my story is not after things started working. It's about when things were not working. If you look at from 99 till 2011, the 12 years I was around basically failing startups, but I
Hmm.
thoroughly enjoyed being there because I obviously,
Hmm.
any given time I could have quit and joined a really well-paying job. Hopefully, with the IIT degrees, there is no dearth of, job opportunities. But
Hmm.
I enjoyed, the process of building a product, figuring out product market fit. This whole idea of, building something for nothing really appealed. And also there is an enormous freedom in the early stage environment. If you have a good idea, just go ahead and implement, see what happens, right? So
Hmm.
I was thoroughly enjoying. So I was not fatigued at all. I think eventually when things started working, somewhere deep down, I believe things will work anyway. So it was more of a relief. And okay, now
Hmm.
let's really double down. And now that we've caught a favorable wave, let's ride
Hmm.
it to the maximum. So probably I think somewhat sense of inevitability and a bit of a relief is why how I'll describe first couple of years when things started going well.
Were you still fit by the time,
I was, yeah, I
physically?
think, I've been fit throughout my life. There was a 2 year, lull. I think after I moved back to India and got involved in building Myntra, it was, standard long hours and a lot of, just fully consumed with what we were trying to do. And as a result, I think, I stopped going to gym after having been a gym goer for 6, 7 years. And those 2 years, but I could see the effect, slowly started gaining weight, energy started dropping, sleep quality started suffering, focus started wavering and so on. And then I decided that I need to go back to fitness. It was a little difficult to go back in, but somehow I managed to get back in and really never look back. So 2009 to now, it has been an integral part of my lifestyle. I mean, in fact, so integral that if you force me to give up one between fitness and startups, I think startups is what I'll give up, but not fitness.
Thankfully, you do something very close to fitness and write about it, so
Yeah.
you don't have to probably give up anything at all. Um, Mukesh, something really changed in an American hospital. Do you want to tell us when and how that happened, despite your emphasis on fitness overall?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it was a, almost like a freak situation. In 2007, I was in between a transition period. I used to come to India for every 3 weeks, go back for 1 week. And, so like in 6 months in a row, I was doing this, twice, time zone and 12-hour, time zone change, and also sleeping less, eating mostly outside food and so on. And I think, on one of such trip back to US, I ended up having this, really strange symptom where I was not even able to look into light, this throbbing headache, this just won't go away, and just feeling like really, really weak and out of energy, ended up going to emergency. And after some tests, it was diagnosed with meningitis, which can, depending on the strain, could be quite deadly. So it was pretty nerve-wracking 2, 3 days for me, being, completely isolated, quarantined, while more tests were being done. Eventually turned out to be milder form and I got out of it. But it was a huge wake-up call. I did not also understand, what was it and why it happened. But it
Yeah.
piqued my interest. I started, looking into it, and eventually I understood, when you are, you know, changing time zones continuously, sleeping less, eating outside, your immunity system starts to go down, and your body's innate ability to fight off, any of the infections goes down dramatically. And that's when there's something called blood-brain barrier. So basically, that blood-brain barrier does not allow almost any pathogens to go into, brain area, right? But when
Mm.
the immunity is compromised, then the, bacteria or viral in this case is able to go infect the brain, and that's what, meningitis is. So I think, I realized that, my one is the lifestyle for that brief period was quite unhealthy. On top of that, even
Mm.
though I've been active, but I was active only in one dimension where I was working out, but not paying attention to many other facets of health. So it was not very holistic and balanced. And since then, I think it was a very strong impetus for me to want to learn more about health in general, experiment a lot of things, and I think that has shaped, I think, a lot of my personal journey and professional journey since then.
Right. It must have been scary. I imagine. I'm glad you came out of it
Thank you.
fine. Um, would you tell us about one of, or if not the most successful day of your life, of your professional life, when you felt that all stars have finally aligned? And
Right.
on that day, what did you feel and what did you go through?
I think I really don't think, I think in a startup, what happens is you go through so much, intensity, etc., trying to make things work. I think you feel in some ways more satisfied when you solve a important problem, or you see, people within the company start to grow and perform at a much different level. That gives you, or, biggest, when customers start, raving about your product, which happened in both my Myntra journey and Cult journey. Like you feel a sense of you're really building something, meaningful and worthwhile. I think when some milestones like funding, or in Myntra case, exit, etc. happen, you feel, I think those are more of a, especially, acquisition, etc. is a mixed feeling. You're not sure whether you're doing the right thing or not. There's a relief that you are able to give shareholders a return back. Employees are able to see their ESOP transfer into some meaningful value and so on. But I genuinely don't remember every single day. I think it's about, for me personally, it's about, enjoying, nearly every day of the journey, irrespective of how going is. That is, more satisfying part of the whole journey.
I fully relate to it. But I was assuming you'd talk a bit more about the Flipkart, Myntra. What is that relationship? What did that mean, and for you professionally? And did that change your, outlook towards work and life and exits and so forth? Because you were one of the very, very few people who've had like meaningful exits at that time.
No, I think it was one is, it was very, strategically calculated. I knew Flipkart founders from before. We had a lot of common investors, and we were in touch, for a while. And it was the calculation of, with Amazon getting more and more serious about India, can Myntra and Flipkart together be much stronger company in terms of, synergies across the two companies, dominating two categories of electronics and fashion, being able to attract a lot more capital. And our calculation was, this was truly a case where the whole will be, much bigger than sum of parts. So that is what, it's in some ways it was improving probability of success for both Myntra and Flipkart. We also designed in a way where Myntra will, for most part, will continue to operate as a very independent company, won't have to worry about fundraising, so it can heads down focus on products and customers, which is more important. And in retrospect, that's how it has panned out. I think Myntra has continued to thrive in the overall Flipkart ecosystem. Flipkart was very supportive and nurturing of Myntra. So it's one of those rare cases where M&As really worked out. I got involved with the Flipkart leadership team, which was great for me because I got exposure to a much bigger scale. Flipkart was 10 times bigger than what Myntra was. So being able to see problems at that scale, accelerated my own learning curve, I think, which, would have taken me much longer to see at Myntra. So net, I feel it was a great move, worked out really well for the shareholders on both sides. And personally for me, and also it created an opportunity for me to, at some point, move on from Flipkart and, think of becoming an entrepreneur again, which also I believe, is a luxury. Sometime you will end up, just working same company, especially the founder for 15-20 years.
Yeah. Because, as somebody who's really bullish on India, you often talk about India. It was an important milestone for the Indian startup ecosystem as well, that an M&A can work out. And I would imagine, I don't need you to comment on it, that around that time you would also become financially free, where you don't necessarily need to do stuff for money.
Right.
So I'm interested to learn how you chose your next steps and how fitness came to fore for you.
Yeah, I think for me, so you're right. I think, after I exited from Flipkart, I didn't have to work. I could have also chosen to travel around the world or whatnot, right? But I think by then I was very clear that I really love building companies, and I had the clarity that pretty much this is what I'll be doing the rest of my life. When one journey comes to an end, then we start our next journey, and so on. So it was, I had zero doubt that I'm going to start again. Then the question was, in what area? And I tried to look at an area which had a both, kind of intersection of a strong impact angle and also some bit of, deep personal interest. And health and fitness kind of, checked all the boxes for me. Because in health, if you're a health company, if you're successful, you are helping somebody live a better life, literally, right? So and I also believe that health as a trend will grow. Like, more and more people will pay attention to their health. They're looking for credible solutions. So it was a large enough opportunity. And of course, by that time I had pretty deep interest, just I even back then I used to read pretty much everything, try different things and so on. So it was, one of those rare opportunities to, marry passion and opportunity, which can also do some good for the world, right? So it was, that's what led me to starting CureFit.
Yeah. What were the first 100 days like when you were trying to explore what the company should do? What might the product look like? Talk to us about those days.
Yeah, I think so. What we want to do in first 100 days is one is to get a really solid 8 to 10 people. So we've focused a lot on recruitment and really handpicking people who can contribute not only to their area of expertise, but also helping build a very unique culture in the organization. Second thing, we also wanted to really accelerate our product market fit. So we looked at a lot of early stage company, and we in fact ended up acquiring Cult, which was only one gym. We like the
Hmm.
founders, their passion, the format they had created. In some ways, we acquired the product market fit, so we didn't have to go through product market fit from scratch. So I think, yeah, I would
Hmm.
say these two things probably dominate our first 100 days agenda.
Did you have a surprising and nerve-wracking event at Cult for early
Of
on?
course, yeah. I mean, COVID is beyond surprising and beyond nerve-wracking because we were fundamentally an offline business, and the wave one happens and your business shut down. So your revenue goes from 100 to not 50, not 25, but zero. And you have to
Hmm.
still, incur all the expenses. You somehow survive that and things start to bounce back, and then you hit with wave two. And again, you repeat the whole cycle, and then you're thinking you're out of it. And 6 months down the line, now you're wave three. So like, three, knockout punch, in a row,
Hmm.
which so that both 2020 and 21 were very, very difficult. We went through dramatic changes, significant pivots. We kind of, people call this pattern of shrinking to the core, which is what we did. We doubled down on fitness and put all the other, initiatives on hold or shut down. We reduced our overall workforce, change our strategy significantly. And in the end, that not letting a crisis go to waste situation panned out. I think things, in some ways we became much, much better company that we might not have without the crisis. But
Yeah.
during the crisis year were quite painful to say the least.
I want to double click on your M&A first strategy, or let's say you're receptive to any way that enhances growth. So, did you or did you not break your rib or at some point working out?
So you have done your research well. And that's, I think, yeah, very interesting story of how the cult journey started, right? So there is a place where I stay, there is a lake nearby, and I was quite free. I had no job, right? And so in the morning, I used to go for these long walks to, clear my head, think about things, and figure out what I want to do. And I used to see like there is this, mixed martial arts gym called Cult right on the, one side of that lake, and I used to see it every day. And one day, out of curiosity, I decided to go there and inquire, what it's all about. And there was a, mixed martial art class was going on. So I talked to Rishabh, the founder, and I told him who I am. I said, I want to do a trial class. So he put me in on the class. And they were doing this rugby drill where, you have this rugby ball and you hold it and as tight as you can. Other guy has to snatch it out of you and then he gets a point. So I got paired with this, 100 kg man, which was pretty big, both, taller, bigger than me. And we were doing, this wrestling thing. At some point, I was on the floor with him on top of me, trying to snatch the ball away, and which he did eventually successfully. And by the time we were done, I could feel, very sharp pain in my chest area. And I thought it was some muscle sprain or something. I put a Volini and thought it'll go away, but it won't. So next day, go to hospital, get an X-ray done, and I had a hairline fracture of the rib. So that was my very first class in the cult. And by all accounts, I should have run away, never gone back to that place. But I like something about the vibe of the place and also passion of the Rishabh. So after I was healed, I again went back, started talking to Rishabh, which ultimately led to us acquiring Cult. And today, Cult is by far the largest gym chain in the country.
It has to be one of the most adventurous acquisition stories, I have to say.
Right, right.
Um, so around that time, you talked about the crisis and not letting a crisis go to waste. Where I used to stay in Delhi, there was a gym right in front of us, but I started seeing multiple like food, fitness. There was like end to end kind of a solution that you were building. How did you decide to double down on something and let go of something. Talk to us about the decision-making framework and the conversations with your team members, because I
Right.
think you'd formed a pretty star team early on
Right.
from places you'd worked with before.
So I think genesis of all this was, we have defined CureFit's mission as making health easy, because we believe in a lot of people struggle with health. So we wanted to build a platform, still want to build a platform which solve for all aspect of healthy lifestyle, which ranges from food, fitness, mental health, your primary care, and so on. So we've been building solutions for all of these, but each category had its own challenges, either the TAM issue, like for example, health food market is not very big, or unit, economic issues, and so on. We were dealing with this. So we found a outstanding product market fit in Cult, which is our fitness offering, which took off in a very big way. Food also, we got decent traction, but again, the AOVs are mostly 200 rupees or so, and making unit economics work is very challenging in those price points. So we're dealing with all of this, and then pandemic happens, right? And which forced us to really think, what can we save and what do we need to let go? And we decided to then, I think the most prudent thing to do was to double down on our strength. In some ways, so what we recognize the fitness we're already winning, and pandemic will be a good opportunity for us to consolidate the entire fitness market, which is what we did. And the other businesses, where we either spun them off as an independent company, or many things like MindFit, CareFit, etc., we shut down. So I think larger ambition is still there. That decision making framework was really, I think, do we have product market fit or not? Do we believe in the overall market potential? Is our assumption about that is true? Like we believe, for example, mental health will be a big market, but our 3-4 years to show that while mental health problem is very big, market is very small, because most people are today not seeking solution, they are not paying for it. So we look at, and what about the unit economics, are they sustainable? So after factoring all of this, we have been from day one a very transparent organization, so everybody will know everything. So in some ways that was that turned out to our strength during pandemic period, because we were able to have this transparent conversation with everybody who was involved, and people rallied to it. They understood, they treated as if it's their own company, and it's a very participative decision making process. So overall, at least at the senior to mid management level, it was not that difficult. But in the end, when you have to reduce staff, etc., that has to be painful at certain level. So we all felt the pain for it, but even more so people who got affected in that. So that's unfortunate impact of what of the pandemic that we need to go through. We obviously did everything in our power to be helpful, but ultimately losing your job in the middle of pandemic is obviously not a nice thing. That's unfortunate reality, and part and parcel of what you go through in the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The point that you made about mental health is an important and huge problem. It seems like the market still has to mature.
Right.
Tell us about the LLL Foundation and how you discovered them and what is it all about?
Yeah, so during our mental health explorations, we reached out to a lot of people who are active in mental health space. There are both for-profit companies, individual therapists, and foundations. So Live Love Laugh Foundation, started by Deepika Padukone. I think she was one of the first Bollywood personality to come out and talk about depression in a very transparent manner, I think, which itself is quite commendable. Because we also, on top of everything else, mental health is also a topic which has carries reasonable taboo around it, for no reason. It just, and the disease, right? So we need a lot of people to come out and publicly talk about it. And since she started talking about a lot of other well-known people across sports, Bollywood, business, they talk about mental health more openly, which gives encourage other people to step out and do something about it. I know Dr. Shyam Bhatt, who was involved in Live Love Laugh Foundation, was also chief doctor for our MindFit solutions. So he worked very closely. So that's how the association with the organization developed. And partly, I think probably I'm guessing you bring it up in the context of the book. For me, like both the books I've written, these are, I want to communicate some of these key messages around productivity, health, etc. And I do this as a non-profit initiatives. So it was great for LLL Foundation to collaborate with us, so that all the proceeds, royalties of the book can go to the foundation. So hopefully our small bit in contributing to all the good work they're doing.
Yeah, I just want to bring it to attention to all the people who watch it around the world that every single penny earned from the book goes to this particular foundation that Bollywood actress Deepika Padukone has set up, and Mukesh is supporting her organization through this book and his previous one. Mukesh, I have read both your books, and I think that the flavor of both the books is similar, fitness, but what they are about is very different.
Right.
So, do you want to give us, our audience, which is India and international, a
Right.
flavor of both books, just what they are about and why did
Sure.
you write them?
Yeah, I think, one of the things you recognize in your entrepreneurial journey very early on, that how limited time you have. Like people may have different resources, but no one has more time. So the only
Hmm.
vector of optimization is how can you do, more in the same amount of time. That started my own journey of exploring, how do you really boost productivity? What does science has to say about that? What are the tools and practices? What do other people who are really productive do, right? And I studied a lot of that, implemented in my own life. I think I'm able to dramatically improve my own productivity. And then I felt this is really good. Productivity seems to be like a muscle that you can keep training, it gives you more and more. And I was so giddy with excitement, wanted to share with other people, right? And that's led to me writing my first book, No Limits, which is all about art and science of productivity. And then
Hmm.
I think we talked already about second book, Hacking Health, which is more about, I think, primarily tries to cover how health works. So health, I believe, something which is simultaneously very simple and very complicated. And what
Yeah.
I wanted to do, bridge the gap. I wanted to trace the kind of evolution of health. Like, how did modern understanding of health came to be? Who discovered in calories? When did we learn about sugar versus fat? What does things like caffeine and alcohol, etc., do to our body? What's our understanding of immunity? What's happening in the cutting edge of longevity and so on, right? And then translating all of that into also simple tools that people can follow. But mostly is the book is designed to that I'm not going to only tell you what's good for you. I'm also going to tell you why it is good for you, and what we know
Hmm.
about it, what we don't know about it. In some ways, very transparent book, tries to do justice to the current understanding of science, which in all transparency, not 100% complete. I think health science itself has a long way to go, but whatever we know as of today, I try to communicate that into the book. And then there are some happy coincidences I found out in the process of writing a book. Like the lot of ancient wisdom and modern science on health is starting to converge. The parallels are just absolutely uncanny. Just to talk about few, like fasting has been part of every religious tradition. It does a lot
Yeah.
of wonderful things in the body. And nowadays, calorie restriction or intermittent fasting is all the rage. And the more importantly, it's like very deeply scientifically validated. We know exactly why it works, why it's good for you. Things like prayer. Prayer is a form of meditation, is a form of grateful, the gratitude practice, which is becoming very popular. Most cultures talk about in getting up early and seeing sunrise. Now science also talks about it, right? That
Hmm.
exposure to morning sunlight, evening sunlight, is great for controlling your circadian rhythms. So I think finding all those parallels have been quite amazing, right? And it's a good thing that they are converging and not diverging, which makes it even more stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about sleep, you talk about movement, and you talk about diet.
Right.
Among other things, like these seem to be the core aspects of it. So talk to us about some of the experiments that you've done in discovering your, say, body market fit with each of these three things.
Right. Lots of experiment. I think this I think one, let me first start by just summarizing. And I think you alluded to it, I think the core message of the book, if you really distill down, how to pursue good health, I think for me it really boils down to this: eat less, sleep more, always move. If people can do these three things through whatever mechanism, it doesn't matter. By and large, you will do pretty well in managing your health. The whole book is about explaining the evolution of this history, science, tools, etc., to basically um, help you do this. Actually, and so what was your question?
I wanted to learn about some of
Experiments.
the experiments that you've done
Right.
because, as somebody who's traveled a lot, who's lived in different places,
Right.
um, I'm sure you have done that. I often, this space is confusing. Somebody says, don't have coffee. The other person says, have coffee all the
Right.
time. Somebody says, red wine is great for health. The other one says, you must absolutely
Right.
abstain from
Yeah.
alcohol. I'm very interested in learning from successful entrepreneurs such as yourself about the experiments that you've
Right.
done on yourself and what you learned from it.
No, so I have done, all kind of experiment from something very simple to very complex. So I think my own fitness journey, went through from traditional bodybuilding to long distance running to CrossFit. That's when I got injured multiple times, to yoga, to Pilates, to dance. And then eventually I'm realizing that, just movement and some kind of resistance training is, good enough, right? It doesn't matter how you figure out a movement. Like I have tried variety of diets, different fasting formats, and in fact I struggled initially a lot with the fasting. And at some point I thought, fasting, or even though there is all the data is there, but fasting is not for me. But but the data I just keep pouring in, and after some point, I studied more deeply and created a protocol for myself, and was able to successfully adapt this, what people call 16-8 fasting, where you fast for 16 hours and eat in an 8-hour window. And now it works brilliantly for me. In fact, I feel super energetic in the other 16 hours. I've done a lot of experiments with the cold therapy. So earlier, what I used to do is I used to get this big ice slabs at home in the morning every Sunday, melt them on a tub, and then just go immerse myself for 1 to 2 minutes for cold exposure, because it's supposed to be really good. And again, there's a lot of science backing this for your immunity boosting. And now I have this kind of cryo tub, which automatically adjusts the temperature of the water, so that any time of the day I can do that. I have tried CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitoring. It's a patch you put with a small, needle goes inside, tracks the sugar level continuously. At the moment you eat something, within, you will know how fast your sugar levels are spiking, whether it's healthy, unhealthy. I've tried this Muse meditation device. So it's like a headband you put on your head, and it's, listen to magnetic signals coming out of your brain to see how calm or disturbed your brain waves are, and you get that audio feedback. You can use that to practice meditation and many more. So I think it's a pastime and hobby for me, but in the process also I learned something that I can use in my lifestyle, and as well as sometime translate into products and services that we offer at the cult.
Yeah, and maybe M&A opportunities, because there
M&A
are many
opportunities as well.
companies trying to
Absolutely.
build around that. The good thing about the book, at least the one that I found, was that it provides both complex science-backed facts, which somebody can consume if they want to, and also things that that one can just apply. Mental models to remember. The book starts with something like "Eat less, mostly plants." Something, I think, Michael
Right.
Pollan's
Pollen, yeah.
Pollan's quote. So, how did you consume this kind of literature, and what was the process of actually distilling such complex medical literature into an accessible language, into a format, 300 words or so, that
Yeah.
people can
Yeah, I think
learn more about?
multiple things contributed. One is, I myself, like to read. So that made, which is means I didn't start reading for health when I started writing the health book. I've been reading about health for the last 15 years, right? So any good book comes out, it ends up on my shelf, and I would, more often than I'll read it. Within Cult, we had this team of experts, nutrition expert, mental health expert, multiple fitness experts, and we'll have a lot of meetings to talk about various topics, right? When I started writing a book, I had a small team of 2 researchers who worked exclusively with me, poring over all the literature. They will go through it, find, then we'll triangulate all the findings, and anything will feel interesting. I would not only try on myself, but we have a lot of enthusiastic people in the cult ecosystem who would also love to try. So I asked them to try and give feedback. So it's like this all these multiple factors, both academic reading as well as practical experimentation is the method that we followed, right? It's in the end, I think it's a team of almost 9 to 10 people who collaboratively worked on parsing through all the information and figuring out what is something we feel comfortable endorsing or not endorsing.
So, when was the process of writing, editing going on? Was it during the pandemic? Because it seems like that was
Pretty
not an
much,
easy
yeah.
time for
Actually,
you.
yeah. Because my last book, No Limits, was published right at the start of pandemic. And by the
Yep.
time I had decided that this is the second book I want to write, it obviously took a backseat for 6 to 9 months, because all of our mind space was
Firefighting
dealing
to
with the
do. Yeah.
pandemic. But towards the end of 2020, I got serious about writing, and I follow a process where I will in the morning, I'll take a half an hour to 1 hour, try to write 500 words to 1,000 words. Typical book is 100,000 words. So technically, if you can write even 500 words a day, you can be done with your book in 200 days. But then you need to be super clear about like in non-fiction books, you need a lot of background material and
Yeah.
validation, which is where you need team and all the time is required. So I think I would have taken almost 15 months to write first draft, and then a few revisions working with the editors. The whole process end to end was probably about 2 years.
How did Chandra write the forward of the book? Because he's fit. He has an amazing work-life
Yeah.
regimen. But why did you choose him? How did you decide? Why not Hrithik Roshan,
First,
Shah Rukh
yeah.
Khan, or whatever? Like, yeah.
First of all, I had a great fortune to work with him last 2 years. I think it's been for me from, as a mentorship, it was phenomenal
Do you
because,
want to tell us a bit about who I'm talking about for our
right, of course,
people who are not in India?
Mr. N. Chandrasekharan, he is chairman of Tata Group. I think he's led the group very successfully, after his incredibly successful stint leading TCS. He is, probably the foremost, business person in India, and more importantly, also super fit. He has single-handedly, kind of build this culture of long distance running in India, where he has by now completed numerous marathons. So I think, as I got to know him, a lot of our conversations will be about health. And he has, he knows pretty much everything that there is to know about health, very enthusiastic about it, actively promotes long distance running as one method for pursuing healthy lifestyle. So, and he was very graceful about, willing to ride forward. I felt, he's a great person because he, uh, practices what he preaches. So it becomes, quite authentic despite his, incredibly hectic schedule and huge demand on his time. He still, prioritize his health and is, very genuine, authentic about it. So I was honored that, I could get a forward from him.
Yeah. No, congratulations to that. Just like quickly wrapping up. Now, you've survived the pandemic. In fact, many would say you've emerged stronger, anti-fragile, to borrow Nassim Nicola Taleb's
Right.
terminology. What does the future look like? Of course, you mentioned M&A could be, you're not ruling that out, but how are you thinking about exploring, scaling products, markets, and so forth?
I think there are two, primary axes for evolution for us. See, in India today, there's still only 5 million people who go to gym, and 10% of them are already, member of cult. But 5 million in a country of 1.4 billion is too small. So I think the biggest imperative for us in the coming years or even coming decade is how we take this number of 5 million to 50 million. So it's a meaningful number. So how do we promote the culture of fitness in the country? So I think that is one. Second thing is, we have done very well in fitness, but fitness alone is not good health. You all these other
Hmm.
factors which also go into healthy lifestyle, which for us, got paused during pandemic. Slowly we want to go back into some of those things so we can keep embarking on the journey of being a more holistic health platform. So that's the other area. And then other practical considerations, I think we are very close to profitability. We want to do that. We are starting to think about IPO plans very seriously so we can create a meaningful exit and return for our investors. So yeah, these are some of the things where Cult is going to focus
And
on.
unit economics, is that
Yeah.
on your radar?
So that in fitness, we've always been unit economics positive, and that has been, so business model was wise. We have been, pretty strong footing, which has gotten much stronger of late. And what we are now, just working towards being company level profitability, and at least for our fitness service portfolio, I think we're just 2 or 3 quarters away from that.
Oh wow, that's exciting. The final section of this particular discussion focus on how you relax, because there are, so as somebody who
Right.
keeps reading and experimenting on his body, I'm assuming you probably don't do anything to harm your body much. So what does the process of relaxation look like for you? How do you unwind, if at all? What does a cheat day look like for you, if at all?
Yeah.
And we can just take it from there.
Yeah, I think, for me, even, my morning, usually I think couple of hours, which are dedicated to fitness, wellness related things. So getting up, doing some kind of activity in the gym. This is very varied. I'd like to go for a walk in the morning, see sunrise, etc. Meditate on most days. Similarly, in the evening, most like my wind down routine, boils down to spending some time with my kids, which are, quite grown up now. Post that, just reading a book, again meditating, reflecting, thinking about my day, and which also translates into very little social life, which is but I get enough and more interaction during my work day, because most of my work involves just meeting with a lot of interesting people. So I think I get enough social exposure during the day, and I try to avoid that in the evening. So I would say most of my relaxations around reading, workout, movies, kids.
Wonderful. And if you were to see around yourself, the young people who work in your company, they're obviously working very hard. There are long hours inbuilt. Are you doing some things to make fitness and mental health, etc., part of their routine as well?
Yeah.
Because it's
For
very common for young professionals to
right.
work long and then party over the weekend, which you
Yeah.
address in the book
You are
directly.
right.
Is that, yeah?
Generally speaking, that's the trend. But I think for us, CureFit, we really wanted to practice what we preach, right? So we have 4 core values. Our fourth core value is nurture your mind and body. So we have kind of baked into company constitution. We have created a lot of rituals and processes and policies. For example, everybody gets a free cult subscription. People get significant discount on all the other health and wellness product that we retail. Then we have monthly events. We have an annual fit games where we give every there's a 2 days of this games extravaganza where everyone plays some sports, and there are teams and competitions and so on. So I think we have and a lot of people when they join cult, they end up losing weight in for 6 to 9 months, because see, we all of us get really influenced by our environment, and cult is an environment which is thriving with fitness conversation, fitness activities, and so on. And people it has a positive effect on people who join, and they get inspired, they find mentors, buddies, etc., to work out with, and see a lot of positive change in their health during their stint at CureFit.
10 years from now, if you're really, really successful, wildly successful, way beyond your dreams, as a person, as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a spouse, whatever, what does the world really look like?
Yeah, for me, I think I'm at a core entrepreneur. I want to build things which hopefully makes the world a better place. So really, I think nothing will change for me. 10 years from now, I'm pretty sure I'll be working on some really significant problem, which is, can create positive impact scale. It may be a for-profit project or not for-profit project. I don't know. That will evolve. But, I think, I like building things. I like solving problems. I like scale. So I'm sure it'll be some combination of those things.
Awesome. Any final piece of advice to young professionals and students listening to you, perhaps inspired by a story or book?
Yeah, I think given the topics that we talked about, I think I will probably reiterate 2 things. One is, entrepreneurship is a very long-term game. It takes easily 10 plus years to build a really good company. And even if you do that, 90% of value creation happens in second decade. So I'll really encourage people to think, long-term as they think about entrepreneurship seriously. And second thing is, investment in your health is what enables the longevity in entrepreneurship, because your staying power goes up. You are able to focus more, think better, don't get too affected by the usual stressful events which are inevitable in the entrepreneurial journey. So, and the younger you start, the earlier you start, the compounding effects of that are even more pronounced. If you start being active lifestyle in your 20s and 30s, you will not run into lifestyle disease in your 40s and 50s, which will give you that long-term runway to pursue your dreams and create a much deeper impact than you might otherwise.
Play the long game. Thank you very much, Mukesh. I learned so much from both your books and this conversation. The way you're building this organization is an inspiration for everyone around. So thank you so much for doing this for the ecosystem, and I really appreciate the fact that you're donating all the proceeds to a non-profit focused on mental health.
Thank you, Utkarsh. Thanks for inviting me. I greatly enjoyed the conversation, and wish you and your listeners all the best.